What if the soul is not a separate thing inside the body, but a pattern held together by matter, memory, and consciousness? Physics does not find a hidden spark floating beyond nature. It finds atoms, energy, signals, and fragile order. Yet somehow, from this order, a person feels love, fear, identity, and the quiet sense of being alive. This perspective is calm, but deeply unsettling. Before the journey begins, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more slow documentaries about science, consciousness, and the mysteries of existence. Across human history, the soul begins at the outer edge of explanation. It appears wherever people stand before birth, sleep, memory, death, and the strange inward feeling of being alive. Long before instruments measure brain waves or chemistry, the soul gives a name to the hidden center of a person. It is carried in burial customs, songs, myths, laws, and quiet acts of care for the dead. It gives shape to the belief that a life is more than a body seen from outside. It gathers breath, identity, feeling, memory, and moral weight into one simple word. In many cultures, breath becomes the nearest image, because breath is visible in cold air, felt in the chest, and lost when life ends. The body grows still, yet those who remain remember movement, warmth, voice, and intention. The difference between the living person and the silent body seems too deep for ordinary matter to explain. From this distant boundary, the soul is not first a scientific object. It is a human answer to a human experience. It belongs to the region where grief meets imagination and where language reaches for what cannot be held. Ancient people see shadows, reflections, dreams, and trance states, and these experiences suggest that a person may have an inner double. In dreams, the absent return. The dead appear with faces and gestures remembered from life. The sleeping body lies still while the mind moves through places that are not present. Without knowledge of neurons or sleep cycles, these events seem to reveal a hidden traveler within the body. The idea becomes natural, almost unavoidable. A person appears to have an outer form and an inward presence, a visible shape and an unseen bearer of life. Different traditions give this presence different meanings. Some describe it as breath, some describe it as spirit, some link it with moral judgment, ancestry, rebirth, or union with a wider order. Some place it close to the heart, because the heartbeat marks life with steady motion. Others place it near the head, because thought, vision, speech, and intention seem to gather there. These views are not measurements in the modern sense, yet they are careful attempts to organize experience. They form maps of what matters most. They say that a person is not only weight, height, bone, and skin. They say that a life has direction, relation, and value. In this outer region of the topic, the soul is a cultural structure, a way of naming the depth of personhood before physics enters the room. Modern science begins differently. It does not begin with sacred meaning, but with what can be observed, tested, compared, and revised. Physics studies matter, energy, space, time, and the rules that describe their behavior. Biology studies living systems as organized matter that maintains itself, responds to surroundings, and reproduces. Neuroscience studies the brain and nervous system as physical tissue whose activity is linked with sensation, memory, emotion, and awareness. These fields do not find a separate substance called the soul in their instruments. They find cells, signals, molecules, fields, heat, motion, and information carried by physical processes. The absence of a measured soul does not settle every human question, but it sets a boundary around scientific claims. Science can describe what bodies and brains do. It can test whether a proposed soul has detectable effects. It cannot simply confirm a concept that has no measurable form. This difference creates the disturbing new perspective. The soul, when brought into physics, loses its old distance from matter. It can no longer remain only a mist behind the eyes or a silent passenger inside the body. It must be compared with energy, because energy is measurable and conserved. It must be compared with information, because memory and identity depend on patterns. It must be compared with brain activity, because changes in the brain change perception, personality, language, and selfhood. A calm scientific view does not mock the soul. It asks what part of the ancient idea can be translated into physical terms and what part remains outside present evidence. The result is quiet but unsettling. Many qualities once gathered under the soul appear deeply tied to the living body. This outermost layer is therefore a meeting place between inherited meaning and physical explanation. It shows why the soul cannot be treated as a simple thing. It is not one idea with one history. It is a family of ideas shaped by death, love, fear, memory, and social life. It carries the hope that a person is not erased by decay. It carries the intuition that inner experience is real, even though no one else can touch it directly. It carries the sense that moral choices belong to a center deeper than reflex. It carries the feeling that each person is a unique presence in the world. Physics does not begin by denying these experiences. It begins by asking how much of them depends on matter arranged in precise and temporary ways. At the cultural horizon, the soul is also a boundary marker. It separates the living from the dead, the person from the object, the inward from the outward, and the meaningful from the merely mechanical. Yet physics does not use such boundaries in the same way. To physics, the human body is part of the same universe as oceans, stones, stars, and dust. Its atoms are not exempt from natural law. Its warmth is heat. Its motion is force. Its chemistry follows ordinary reactions. Its electrical signals obey physical principles. This does not make life simple. It makes life continuous with the rest of nature. The ancient soul points toward a hidden depth, while science begins to show that depth inside matter itself. The first region remains outside the body, among words, ceremonies, and shared beliefs. It is the broad air around the question. Here, the soul is seen as a human name for inner life before inner life is studied as a physical process. The idea has weight because it answers needs that measurement alone does not remove. It speaks to loss, identity, responsibility, and the private glow of awareness. Yet the path inward begins with a change in method. Instead of asking what people have called the soul, science observes the world that makes people possible. The old word remains at the edge, carrying centuries of meaning, while physics waits with a quieter language of matter, energy, pattern, and change. The outer world that holds human life is not separate from the question of the soul. It is the first physical home of every body and every thought. Earth turns in sunlight, wrapped in air, carrying oceans, rocks, ice, soil, clouds, and living systems. From a distance, the planet is a round body of matter moving through space under gravity. Up close, it is a changing surface where light becomes warmth, water moves through cycles, and chemistry gathers into cells. Human experience begins here. Not in isolation, but inside a planetary system that supports ordered life for a limited time. The body that later thinks of spirit and meaning is first a small part of this wider physical order. Sunlight reaches Earth after leaving a star made mostly of hydrogen and helium. In the Sun, nuclear fusion joins light atomic nuclei and releases energy. This energy travels outward as radiation and eventually reaches the planet as visible light and other forms of electromagnetic radiation. Some of it is reflected by clouds, ice, land, and ocean. Some of it is absorbed and becomes heat. Some of it is captured by plants, algae, and certain bacteria through photosynthesis, a process that uses light to build energy-rich molecules from carbon dioxide and water. This is not a mystical transfer. It is a chain of physical events, yet it is also the beginning of most food, most breath, and much of the energy that later moves through muscles and nervous tissue. The atmosphere forms another surrounding layer. It is a mixture of gases held near the planet by gravity. Nitrogen is most abundant. Oxygen is vital for many complex organisms, and smaller amounts of carbon dioxide, water vapor, argon, and other gases shape climate and chemistry. Oxygen in the air is not only a background condition, it is part of the body's energy system. When people breathe, oxygen enters the lungs and passes into blood. It later helps cells release usable energy from food. Without this exchange, the organized activity of the body cannot continue for long. The old link between breath and soul comes from direct observation, but physics and biology show breath as a material flow between atmosphere and tissue. Water shapes the planet's living surface. It covers much of Earth, moves through rivers and clouds, freezes into ice, soaks into ground, and fills cells. Water is a simple molecule, but its properties make it unusually important for life. It dissolves many substances, carries heat, supports chemical reactions, and remains liquid across a range of conditions found on Earth's surface. In living bodies, water is not decoration. It is the medium in which molecules move, fold, separate, bind, and react. Human blood is mostly water. The fluid around cells is water-based. The brain itself contains a large amount of water. The private life that seems inward and weightless depends on this ordinary liquid moving through physical spaces. The rocks and minerals beneath life also belong to the same story. Earth is built from elements that formed through cosmic processes before the planet existed. Carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, calcium, iron, phosphorus, sodium, potassium, and many other elements become part of bodies. They are not special because they enter life. They remain atoms with physical properties. Calcium strengthens bones and participates in cell signaling. Iron sits inside molecules that help blood carry oxygen. Sodium and potassium help nerve cells produce electrical differences across their membranes. Phosphorus forms part of genetic material and energy-carrying molecules. These elements come from the planet's material store and cycle through air, water, soil, food, and flesh. Life arises and continues only where physical conditions allow enough stability and enough change. Too much disorder breaks structures apart. Too much rigidity prevents reactions and adaptation. On Earth's surface, temperature, pressure, liquid water, sunlight, and chemistry have allowed living systems to exist for billions of years. A living system maintains itself by taking in matter and energy, using them and releasing waste and heat. It is never closed away from the world. It is a pattern that persists through exchange. A person, viewed from this planetary layer, is not a sealed vessel containing an independent essence. A person is an open process, breathing air, drinking water, eating transformed sunlight, and giving heat back to the surroundings. This view changes the feeling of the soul in a subtle way. The old image often places the soul inside the body as something private and self-contained. The planetary view shows that the body itself is not self-contained. It is continuous with fields of air, flows of water, food webs, mineral cycles, and sunlight. Every breath changes the boundary between inside and outside. Every meal brings the outer world into the body. Every heartbeat moves matter that was recently part of the environment. The skin gives a visible border, but the physical person is sustained by crossings. The sense of an inner center depends on a living system that is constantly open to the world. The carbon in cells may once have moved through a leaf, a shell, a sea, or the atmosphere. The oxygen in blood comes from surrounding air. The water in the body has passed through clouds, rivers, pipes, plants, and other organisms. This does not erase individuality. It explains its material basis. A life is not made from unique kinds of matter. It is made from common matter, organized in a rare and temporary way. The same elements that form dust, stone, and ocean also form tissue. The difference lies in arrangement, movement, regulation, and pattern. Physics does not reduce the body to dead material. It shows how matter can be arranged so that it senses, repairs, moves, and remembers. At this outer planetary level, there is no need to enter the skull to see the first disturbance. The human inward life begins in a world without a strict spiritual boundary around human substance. The matter of the body belongs to Earth. The energy that powers it comes through natural channels. The gases that sustain it move through a shared atmosphere. The water that carries its chemistry is part of a planetary cycle. The physical laws that shape oceans and weather also shape blood flow. Heat loss and chemical bonds. The soul, if considered through science, cannot be placed outside this continuity without evidence of a separate influence. Living Earth, therefore, becomes the second region of the path inward. It surrounds the body with quiet dependence. It shows that a person is not a lonely spark lowered into matter, but a local expression of matter under suitable conditions. This does not decide the final meaning of consciousness. It does not measure grief, beauty, or moral life. It simply establishes the ground. Before there is memory, thought, or self-awareness, there is a planet with sunlight, air, water, minerals, and stable physical law. The ancient idea of soul begins to meet the larger fact that every living person is made and maintained by the world around them. Inside the surrounding world, the human body appears as matter arranged with unusual care. It has weight, temperature, volume, and chemical composition. It occupies space like any other physical object, yet it also repairs wounds, balances fluids, moves with intention, and carries the signs of a personal life. From the outside, skin, hair, eyes, hands, posture, and expression give the first evidence of a person. Beneath that surface, the body is not a single solid thing. It is a changing organization of atoms and molecules, held together by physical forces and shaped by biology. Matter is made of atoms, and atoms are made of smaller parts. In ordinary life, the important level is not the deep interior of the atom, but the way atoms join and interact. Carbon can form long chains and rings. Oxygen can bind and release electrons in reactions. Hydrogen gives structure to water and many organic molecules. Nitrogen helps build proteins and genetic material. Calcium strengthens mineral structures in bone, sodium, potassium, and chlorine help maintain electrical and chemical balance. These elements are not alive by themselves. They become part of life when they are arranged into systems that preserve order, respond to change, and use energy. The body is built from molecules of many sizes. Water fills much of its space. Proteins fold into shapes that allow them to support tissue, speed reactions, carry signals, and form channels through membranes. Lipids, which are fatty molecules, create flexible barriers around cells and store energy. Carbohydrates provide fuel and structural support. Nucleic acids, including deoxyribonucleic acid, hold inherited instructions in chemical form. These molecules do not think or feel on their own. They follow chemical rules, they attract, repel, bend, break, and join according to their structures and surroundings. Yet together they form the material basis for a living person. The cell is the basic living unit of the body. A cell is a small organized system surrounded by a membrane. The membrane is a selective boundary, allowing some substances to pass while limiting others. Inside the cell, molecules are sorted into regions where different tasks occur. Some structures produce usable energy, build proteins, process waste, maintain shape, and store genetic material. The cell is alive because it continually manages flows of matter and energy. It does not escape physics. It uses physics. It keeps itself far from simple disorder by constant activity. A human body contains many kinds of cells, and each kind performs a limited role. Muscle cells contract. Red blood cells carry oxygen. Immune cells recognize and respond to danger. Skin cells form protective layers. Bone cells maintain hard tissue. Gland cells release chemical messages. Nerve cells carry signals across long distances. No single cell contains the whole person in a conscious form. The body's identity comes from coordinated activity among trillions of cells, each with local duties. This coordination gives the appearance of unity. A person moves as one body, speaks with one voice, and is recognized as one life, even though the material process is distributed. The skeleton gives the body a durable frame. Bones are not dead beams. They are living tissue containing minerals, collagen, cells, blood vessels, and nerves. They are shaped by growth, load, repair, and chemical balance. Muscles attach to bones and produce movement by contracting through molecular changes inside their fibers. Tendons transmit force. Joints guide motion. The body's ability to act in the world depends on this mechanical arrangement. Walking, lifting, breathing, and turning the head all depend on forces passing through tissue. Intention, when it becomes movement, must pass through muscle, bone, and friction with the ground. The organs form deeper regions of organized matter. The heart is a muscular pump that moves blood through vessels. The lungs exchange gases with the atmosphere. The liver processes nutrients and many chemicals. The kidneys regulate water, salts, and waste. The digestive system breaks food into molecules the body can absorb. The endocrine system releases hormones, which are chemical messengers that travel through blood and influence distant tissues. Blood pressure, oxygen level, temperature, sugar level, and fluid balance must remain within narrow ranges. This regulation is called homeostasis, meaning the maintenance of internal stability. Homeostasis gives the body a quiet continuity. The outside world changes, but the inner chemical environment must stay controlled enough for cells to function. If temperature rises too far, proteins lose their shapes. If salts become too concentrated or too diluted, cells are harmed. If oxygen falls too low, energy production fails. If blood sugar becomes too low or too high, tissues are disturbed. The body therefore lives by adjustment. It sweats, shivers, changes blood flow, releases hormones, alters breathing, seeks water, and uses stored energy. These actions show the body as a self-regulating physical system. This material view does not make the body simple or empty. It makes it intricate. The body is not a container for life in the way a jar contains water. The body is the living activity itself. Its form is maintained by replacement. Skin cells are shed and renewed. Blood cells are made and removed. Proteins are built and broken down. Molecules enter through food and air, then leave through breath, urine, sweat, and waste. The person appears continuous because the organization remains recognizable, not because every piece of matter stays the same. Here the soul, considered from physics, meets a harder boundary. The qualities once imagined as separate from matter are already surrounded by matter doing organized work. Warmth, breath, motion, appetite, fatigue, and healing are not signs of a hidden substance acting from elsewhere. They are measurable processes within tissue. Injury to the body can alter mood, memory, and personality. Hormones can change perception and desire. Fever can disturb thought. Hunger can narrow attention. Sleep loss can change judgment. These facts do not explain consciousness completely, but they show that personal life is deeply dependent on bodily states. At the level of body as matter, the disturbing perspective becomes calmer and more precise. A person is not made from a special material different from Earth. A person is made from ordinary atoms arranged into cells, tissues, organs, and systems. The visible unity of a human being rests on countless physical interactions. The body does not merely carry a life. It performs the ongoing conditions that allow life to appear before the inward world of thought is reached. The path passes through this organized matter, where the ancient idea of an inner essence begins to share space with chemistry, structure, repair, and regulation. Within the organized matter of the body, life depends on a steady movement of energy. The body is not only shaped matter, it is working matter. It must keep temperature within a narrow range, move substances through membranes, repair damage, build new molecules, send signals, contract muscles, digest food, and remove waste. None of this happens without energy changing form. Physics describes energy as the capacity to do work or produce change. In a living body, energy is not a glowing force or a separate essence. It is stored in chemical bonds, released through reactions, carried by molecules, and lost as heat. Food is the main entrance for this usable energy. Plants, algae, and some bacteria use sunlight to build sugars and other energy-rich molecules. Animals and humans receive this stored energy by eating plants, or by eating other organisms that have eaten plants. The path is long, but the physical principle is simple. Energy captured from light becomes chemical energy in food. Food enters the body, is broken apart by digestion, and becomes smaller molecules that can pass into blood. These molecules are carried to cells, where they become fuel, building material, or stored reserve. Digestion begins as a controlled dismantling of matter. Teeth break food into smaller pieces. Saliva moistens it and begins chemical breakdown. The stomach churns food with acid and enzymes, which are molecules that speed reactions without being used up in the same way as fuel. The small intestine continues the breakdown and absorbs sugars, amino acids, fats, vitamins, minerals, and water. These substances cross from the inner space of the gut into the body's circulation. The process is physical and chemical, yet it is also intimate. Matter from the outer world becomes part of the living system. It may become muscle, blood, heat, or the energy that supports a thought. Inside cells, one of the most important fuels is glucose, a simple sugar. Cells can break glucose through a series of reactions that transfer energy into a molecule called adenosine triphosphate. This molecule is often described as an energy carrier because cells use it to power many forms of work. When one of its phosphate groups is removed, energy becomes available for cellular tasks. Muscles use it to contract. Membrane pumps use it to move ions against their natural direction. Cells use it to build proteins, copy genetic material, transport cargo, and maintain order. This is not a store of life in a spiritual sense. It is a short-term chemical link between fuel and function. Oxygen makes energy release far more efficient in many human cells. After air enters the lungs, oxygen passes through thin surfaces into blood. Red blood cells carry it through the body using hemoglobin, an iron-containing protein. Cells take in oxygen and use it in structures called mitochondria. Mitochondria are small internal parts of cells that help extract usable energy from fuel. In this process, electrons move through a chain of molecules, and their movement helps produce adenosine triphosphate. Water and carbon dioxide are formed as products. Carbon dioxide returns to the blood, reaches the lungs, and leaves with exhaled air. This connection between breathing and energy gives old ideas a physical depth. Breath is not the soul, but breath supports the conditions under which awareness can continue. When oxygen supply fails, the brain and other organs are quickly threatened because their energy demands are high. The brain is especially dependent on steady fuel and oxygen. It has limited energy storage and must receive a constant blood supply. A change in breathing, circulation, or blood chemistry can change consciousness. Fainting, confusion, sleepiness, panic, and loss of awareness can all arise from physical changes in the systems that deliver oxygen and fuel. Heat is another sign of metabolism. Metabolism means the full network of chemical reactions that build up, break down, and transform substances in the body. Not all energy from food becomes useful work. Much of it becomes heat. This heat keeps the body warm, but it must be controlled. If the body loses too much heat, reactions slow and organs fail. If heat rises too far, proteins and membranes are damaged. The body adjusts by changing blood flow near the skin, producing sweat, shivering, altering behavior and changing metabolic activity. Warmth, often associated with life and presence, is a measurable result of chemical activity. Energy flow also reveals why life is temporary and active rather than fixed. A stone may remain in one place for a long time with little change. A body must work continuously to remain alive. Its order is not permanent by itself. Molecules naturally drift, react, and degrade. Gradients fade unless restored. A gradient is a difference across space, such as a higher concentration of ions on one side of a membrane than the other. Cells spend energy maintaining gradients because those differences allow signals, transport, and movement. Life is therefore not a static possession. It is a maintained imbalance, a pattern held in place by constant exchange. The body stores energy in several forms. Some glucose is stored as glycogen in the liver and muscles. Fat stores larger amounts of chemical energy in adipose tissue during fasting, exertion, or sleep. The body draws on these reserves. Hormones help decide when to store and when to release energy. Insulin supports storage after eating. Other hormones help mobilize fuel when needed. These shifts influence mood, attention, strength, and fatigue. The inner life that feels separate from chemistry is still affected by blood sugar, hunger, stress hormones, and sleep. The sense of self does not float above the body's energy state. It changes with it. This energy view also sets a boundary around common claims about the soul. In physics, energy is conserved, meaning it changes form but is not created from nothing or destroyed into nothing in an isolated system. Some people take this fact to suggest that a personal soul must survive because energy cannot vanish. Science does not support that conclusion. The conservation of energy applies to measurable physical quantities, not to personal identity by itself. When a body dies, its chemical energy, heat, and material components continue to change form and spread into the environment. Conservation does not mean that memory, awareness, or personality remain organized. A flame's heat does not preserve the shape of the flame after the fuel and structure are gone. At this inner layer, the body appears as a river of controlled transformations. Food becomes fuel. Oxygen supports release. Molecules carry usable energy. Heat leaves the body. Waste returns to air, water, and soil. Muscles move because chemical bonds change. Organs work because cells spend energy to resist disorder. The old image of a life force becomes less separate and more physical. Life is not an extra substance added to matter. It is matter in active exchange, maintaining its form by using energy. The path inward reaches the quiet engine beneath breath, warmth, motion, and thought, where every sign of a living presence depends on continuous work. Within the body's energy flow, the nervous system forms a more delicate region of control and communication. It does not stand apart from metabolism, blood, oxygen, and chemistry. It depends on them at every moment. Yet it gives the living body a new kind of coordination. It allows distant parts to act together, surfaces to become sensitive, muscles to respond quickly, and internal states to influence behavior. The nervous system is made of physical tissue, but its activity carries touch, pain, balance, movement, attention, and the first clear signs of an inner world. It is the region where matter begins to seem aware from within. The nervous system includes the brain, spinal cord, nerves, and many smaller networks spread through the body. The brain and spinal cord form the central nervous system. The nerves that extend outward form the peripheral nervous system. These names describe location, not mystery. The system is built from cells, fluids, membranes, proteins, and ions. An ion is an atom or molecule with an electrical charge. Sodium, potassium, calcium, and chloride ions are especially important. Their movement across cell membranes creates electrical changes that allow nerve cells to signal. The main signaling cells are neurons. A neuron has a cell body, branching parts that receive signals, and often a long fiber that sends signals to other cells. This long fiber is called an axon. Some axons run only short distances. Others stretch from the spinal cord toward muscles in the limbs. Their length allows the body to link far regions without waiting for slow chemical diffusion. Neurons do not carry thought like words inside a wire. They carry brief electrical events shaped by chemistry and structure. These events are called action potentials, meaning rapid changes in voltage across the neuron's membrane. A resting neuron maintains an electrical difference between its inside and outside. This difference exists because charged ions are distributed unevenly, and because the membrane allows some ions to pass more easily than others. Maintaining this condition requires energy. Pumps in the membrane move sodium and potassium ions in opposite directions, using adenosine triphosphate as fuel. When a signal begins, channels open and ions move. The electrical state changes and the change travels along the axon. Afterward, the neuron restores its resting condition. Each signal is physical, local, and temporary, but the pattern of signals can guide movement. sensation, and perception. Neurons usually do not touch one another directly at their signaling points. A tiny gap often separates them. This gap is called a synapse. When an electrical signal reaches the end of one neuron, it can trigger the release of neurotransmitters, which are chemical messengers. These molecules cross the gap and bind to the next cell. They may make that cell more likely to fire, less likely to fire, or change its state in subtler ways. This chemical step allows great flexibility. Signals can be strengthened, weakened, delayed, combined, or altered by experience, drugs, hormones, and disease. The nervous system also includes glial cells. For a long time, they were seen mainly as support cells, but modern neuroscience shows that they have important roles. Some help insulate axons with myelin, a fatty wrapping that allows signals to travel faster. Some regulate the chemical environment around neurons. Some help maintain the blood-brain barrier, which controls what enters brain tissue from blood. Some participate in repair and immune responses. Neurons receive much attention because they send signals, but they do not work alone. Nervous tissue is a community of different cell types maintaining the conditions for communication. Sensory nerves bring the world into the body as physical change. Light strikes cells in the eyes and changes molecules sensitive to photons. Sound moves air, vibrates structures in the ear, and bends tiny hair cells. Pressure on the skin opens on channels in nerve endings. Heat and cold change the activity of temperature-sensitive proteins. Chemicals in food and air bind to receptors for taste and smell. Pain can begin when tissue is damaged or threatened, and specialized nerve endings respond. In each case, the outer world does not enter as a picture or a sound in itself. It enters as physical energy or molecules converted into nerve activity. Motor signals move outward from the nervous system to muscles. A decision to lift a hand, once it becomes action, requires signals to travel through spinal pathways and peripheral nerves. At the muscle, a neuron releases a chemical messenger that triggers contraction. Inside muscle fibers, proteins slide past one another, powered by adenosine triphosphate. The result appears smooth and intentional. Beneath it, many signals arrive in timed patterns. The body moves because electrical and chemical events coordinate force across living tissue. The autonomic nervous system controls many processes without deliberate attention. It influences heart rate, blood vessel width, digestion, sweating, pupil size, and many glandular responses. It has divisions that often balance each other, preparing the body for activity or supporting rest, digestion, and recovery. These systems help explain why inner feeling is never only mental. Fear can tighten the chest and quicken the pulse. Calm can slow breathing and soften muscles. Hunger, nausea, warmth, and fatigue shape awareness from below conscious thought. The body speaks to the brain through nerves and chemicals, and the brain speaks back through the same physical roots. This region brings the ancient idea of the soul closer to measurable activity. In many traditions, the soul is linked to sensation, movement, will, and feeling. The nervous system shows how these qualities depend on signals moving through tissue. Damage to a nerve can remove feeling from skin. Damage to the spinal cord can prevent movement below the injury. Chemical changes can alter mood, alertness, pain, or perception. Anesthetic drugs can temporarily remove consciousness by changing nervous system activity. These facts do not solve every problem of awareness, but they show that the living presence of a person is deeply tied to physical signaling. The nervous system does not act as a simple command chain. It is a network of feedback. Signals from the body affect the brain. Signals from the brain affect the body. Reflexes can occur through the spinal cord before conscious awareness of the event becomes clear. Sensory systems filter and adjust incoming information. Motor systems predict the results of movement and correct errors. The organism survives by constant comparison between current state and needed state. This creates a body that is not only alive but responsive. At this layer, the soul as a hidden mover becomes difficult to separate from the moving tissue itself. The body does not wait for an immaterial command before every action. It contains electrical and chemical pathways that prepare, guide, and correct behavior. The person who feels intention from within is supported by networks that begin their work before the intention is fully noticed. The disturbance is quiet. What feels like a single inner power may arise from countless physical events, each small, local, and dependent on energy. The inward path reaches the living currents of the nerves, where matter no longer merely holds shape or burns fuel, but senses, signals, reacts, and begins to form the conditions for experience. Within the nervous system, the brain forms a dense inner landscape of tissue, blood, fluid, and electrical activity. It is not a smooth center hidden behind the face, but a folded organ built from many connected regions. It weighs only a small part of the body, yet it uses a large share of the body's energy. Its work depends on oxygen, glucose, blood flow, salts, water, hormones, and sleep. It is soft, fragile, and physically ordinary in its materials, but its organization allows sensation, memory, movement, language, emotion, and the sense of being a continuing person. The brain lies protected inside the skull, surrounded by membranes and fluid that cushion it. Blood vessels enter and branch through its tissue, bringing oxygen and fuel while carrying away waste. A barrier between blood and brain tissue helps regulate what substances enter this sensitive environment. This barrier is not absolute, but it is selective. The brain requires stability because its cells communicate through small chemical and electrical differences. Too much disturbance can change awareness, movement, or mood. A shift in oxygen, pressure, salt balance, infection, injury, or temperature can alter the person from within. The outer surface of the brain is the cerebral cortex. It is a thin sheet of grey matter folded into ridges and grooves. These folds increase surface area within the limited space of the skull. Grey matter contains many neuron cell bodies, branching connections, and synapses. Beneath it lies white matter, which contains many long nerve fibers coated with myelin. Myelin gives this tissue its pale color and helps signals travel efficiently between regions. The cortex is often associated with perception, voluntary movement, language, attention, planning, and other complex functions. It does not work alone, but it provides a broad surface where many streams of information meet and change. The cortex is divided into regions with different tendencies of function. The back of the brain contains areas important for vision. The sides contain areas involved in hearing, language, memory, and the interpretation of sensory patterns. The upper regions help process touch, body position, and movement. The front regions support planning, decision-making, working memory, social judgment, and the control of action. These divisions are useful, but they are not rigid boxes. Most ordinary acts require many areas working together, seeing a face, recognizing it, feeling its meaning, and deciding how to respond involves wide networks rather than one isolated place. Deeper within the brain are structures that help regulate movement, emotion, memory, and bodily state. The thalamus acts as a major relay and processing hub for many sensory and motor signals. The hypothalamus helps control hunger, thirst, body temperature, stress responses, sleep rhythms, and hormonal signals through its connection with the pituitary gland. The hippocampus is important for forming certain kinds of memory and for linking experience with place and context. The amygdala helps assign emotional significance to events, especially those related to threat and safety. These structures are physical tissue, yet their activity can shape the entire feeling of a life. The brainstem lies below the larger upper brain and connects with the spinal cord. It helps regulate breathing, heart rate, wakefulness, swallowing, and many basic reflexes. Damage in this region can be life-threatening because it supports functions that must continue without pause. The cerebellum, located at the back and lower part of the brain, coordinates movement, balance, timing, and aspects of learning. It helps actions become smooth and precise. Walking across a room, reaching for a cup, and adjusting posture all depend on continuous correction. The sense of effortless movement rests on deep calculation carried out by nervous tissue. The brain is not arranged as a little theatre where the world appears before an inner observer. There is no known central seat where a separate soul watches signals arrive. Instead, the brain contains distributed systems. Visual signals are broken into features such as edges, motion, colour, depth, and form. Sound is separated into timing, pitch, location, and meaning. Touch is mapped across body surfaces. Movement is planned, predicted, and corrected through loops. Memory links current events with stored patterns. Emotion changes attention and bodily readiness. The apparent unity of experience arises from coordination across many processes. This unity is one of the strongest reasons the soul feels obvious from within. A person does not usually experience life as separate brain regions. Experience appears as one field. A room, a body, a mood, and a thought seem to belong together. The brain achieves this unity through timing, recurrent signaling, shared attention, and integrated networks. Recurrent signaling means that information moves not only forward, but also back and across, allowing regions to influence one another repeatedly. A perception is not simply printed into the brain, it is actively constructed and stabilized. Brain architecture also develops over time. At birth, the human brain is already highly organized, but it is not finished. Connections change through growth, experience, learning, injury, and repair. Synapses are formed and removed. Myelin increases along many pathways. Networks become more efficient as repeated patterns are used. The brain is plastic, meaning it can change its structure and function in response to activity and experience. This plasticity supports learning and adaptation, but it also means that identity is physically shaped over time. Childhood, language, care, stress, education, and environment leave marks in nervous tissue. The body remains present inside brain architecture. Signals from the heart, lungs, gut, muscles, immune system, and skin reach brain regions that monitor internal state. The brain does not only look outward through the senses, it also maps the body from within. These internal signals contribute to mood, comfort, unease, hunger, tiredness, and the felt sense of being alive. The mind is therefore not located in the brain as a closed object separate from the body. It is brain activity in constant relation with the body it regulates and represents. At this level, the old idea of the soul as a single hidden center becomes less aligned with what is observed. Personality, memory, language, attention, and emotion can change when particular brain systems are damaged or altered. A stroke may affect speech while leaving other abilities present. Injury to frontal regions may change judgment or impulse control. Degenerative disease may gradually remove memory and recognition. Electrical seizures may produce unusual sensations, movements, or states of awareness. These changes show that the features often linked with the soul depend on the condition of brain architecture. Yet the brain is not merely a machine in the crude sense of a simple device with one function. It is living tissue, self-adjusting, deeply connected, and shaped by history. Its architecture does not diminish the richness of experience. It reveals how fragile and precise the conditions of experience are. The person who seems inwardly unified rests on folded cortex, deep nuclei, white matter pathways, brainstem rhythms, chemical messengers, and blood flow. The path inward has reached the organ where matter becomes organized enough to hold a world from a point of view. Within the brain's architecture, experience depends on changing patterns of activity. The brain is not only a collection of regions, it is a living field of signals moving through networks, rising and falling in strength, joining and separating across time. At any moment, many neurons are quiet, many are active, and many are ready to change their state if the right input arrives. A thought does not sit in one cell. A perception does not rest in one point. The meaningful event is the pattern, shape by which cells are active, how strongly they signal, when they signal, and how their activity relates to other activity across the brain. A neural pattern is a temporary arrangement of activity among nerve cells. It may last for a fraction of a second, repeat in cycles, or stabilize long enough to guide action. When light from an object reaches the eyes, activity begins in the retina and travels toward visual areas of the brain. The pattern is transformed at each stage. Edges, movement, contrast, color, and shape are processed through different pathways. The final experience of seeing one object is not a copy placed inside the head. It is an organized result of many interacting signals. The object seems whole because the brain binds separate features into a usable perception. Sound follows a similar physical path. Vibrations in air become motion in the ear, then electrical signals in nerve fibers, then patterns in auditory regions. The brain does not receive sound as sound itself. It receives timed nerve activity caused by physical vibration. From this, it extracts pitch, rhythm, direction, distance, and meaning. A familiar voice becomes recognizable because current patterns match stored patterns shaped by earlier experience. The same is true for touch, smell, taste, and body position. Each sense begins with physical change and becomes experienced through organized neural activity. The brain is always active, even in quiet. It does not wait passively for the world to enter. It predicts, compares, filters, and prepares. Incoming signals are measured against expectations built from memory and bodily state. If a pattern matches what is expected, the brain may treat it as stable and ordinary. If it differs, attention may shift. This helps explain why perception is not a simple recording. It is an active construction. The brain uses the present signal, past experience, and current need to form the most useful interpretation it can. The result usually feels immediate and direct, but it is built from hidden work. Attention changes neural patterns by giving some signals more influence than others. A crowded room contains many possible streams of sound, movement, color, and touch. The brain cannot treat all of them with equal depth. Attention selects. It increases the strength of some patterns and reduces the impact of others. This selection does not require a separate inner observer. It can arise from networks that weigh importance, novelty, danger, desire, and task. What becomes clear in awareness is partly determined by this weighting. The world that appears to the person is therefore narrower than all the information reaching the senses. Movement also begins as pattern. Before a hand reaches, brain regions prepare possible actions. Signals represent the body's current position, the desired goal, the expected effort, and the likely result. Motor commands move through pathways to muscles, while sensory feedback returns from joints, skin, and eyes. The brain adjusts as motion unfolds. Even a simple gesture depends on continuous comparison. The smoothness of action hides the complexity of its control. The feeling of willing a movement is real as an experience, but it emerges alongside physical preparation and correction within neural circuits. Emotion changes the shape of neural activity. A neutral scene and a threatening scene may involve the same eyes and visual pathways, yet the wider pattern differs. Regions involved in salience, memory, bodily arousal, and action readiness become more or less active. Heart rate, breathing, muscle tension, and hormone release may change. The brain then receives signals from the altered body, adding more texture to the feeling. Emotion is not a ghostly colour added to thought. It is a coordinated physical state involving brain, body, memory, and prediction. It guides what matters. Neural rhythms add another layer. Large groups of neurons can show repeated patterns of electrical activity at different speeds. These rhythms are measured in brain recordings and are associated with sleep, attention, movement, and sensory processing. They are not thoughts by themselves. They are timing structures that influence how signals are coordinated. Just as speech depends on timing between sounds, brain activity depends on timing between cells and networks. The same cells may produce different results depending on when they fire and what other networks are active at the same time. The idea of a stable inner self becomes more difficult at this layer. Neural patterns are always changing. The brain shifts with light, sound, posture, hunger, memory, sleep pressure, hormones, and social context. Even when a person sits still, the brain continues to update the body and the world. The sense of continuity comes from patterns that persist, return, and connect across time, not from complete stillness. A self feels steady because the brain maintains enough structure, memory, and bodily regulation to keep experience coherent. The steadiness is a process. This view is disturbing only because it replaces a simple image with a moving one. The soul is often imagined as a fixed center, a point that has experiences. Neural patterning suggests something less solid and more dynamic. Experiences arise when physical activity is organized in certain ways. A change in pattern can change perception. A drug can alter the balance of neurotransmitters and shift mood or awareness. A seizure can produce sudden sensations, movements, or altered consciousness. Sleep changes the large-scale pattern of the brain and changes the kind of experience that is possible. Anesthesia can interrupt the patterns needed for ordinary awareness. These changes show that the inner world depends on the state of the network. Yet pattern is not nothing. A melody is not found in one note, but it is real when notes are arranged in time. A whirlpool is not a separate substance from water, but it has form while water moves in a certain way. A living thought may be similar in this limited sense. It is not an extra material added to the brain. It is an organized event in matter. The brain's activity carries relations, timing, memory, and response. The person is not located in a single spark. The person appears through coordinated change. At this region, physics and neuroscience speak in a quiet language of activity. Ions cross membranes. Synapses change strength. Networks synchronize and separate. Signals from the senses meet signals from memory in the body. The world becomes perception through transformation. Action becomes movement through timed control. Emotion becomes meaning through bodily and neural coordination. The path inward reaches a place where the soul, if translated into scientific terms, begins to look less like a hidden object and more like a living pattern, held for a while by the active brain. Within the moving patterns of the brain, memory forms a deeper region of persistence. Memory is not stored like an object placed in a room. It is held through physical changes in living networks. A face, a place, a skill, a fear, a name, and a sense of personal history depend on connections that have been altered by experience. The brain changes because it has been used. Signals that pass through circuits can make some pathways more likely to activate again. Over time, these changes allow the past to influence the present without the past remaining as a separate thing. Memory begins with activity. An event reaches the senses, changes neural patterns, and is shaped by attention, emotion, bodily state, and meaning. Not every event becomes a lasting memory. Much of experience fades quickly because the brain cannot preserve everything in detail. Some information is held only briefly, long enough to guide the next action or thought. This short holding is often called working memory, meaning the temporary maintenance and use of information. It allows a person to follow a sentence, compare choices, or keep a goal active. It is fragile and depends on ongoing neural activity. Longer-lasting memory requires more durable physical change. One important process is synaptic plasticity, meaning a change in the strength or structure of connections between neurons. When one neuron repeatedly helps activate another, the connection between them can become stronger. This does not mean a memory sits in one synapse. It means that many synapses across a network become tuned by experience. Later, a partial cue can reactivate part of the pattern, allowing the memory to return in altered form. Remembering is therefore not simple playback. It is reconstruction by a changed brain. The hippocampus plays an important role in forming many memories of events and places. It helps bind together features of experience that are stored across different brain regions. A remembered morning may include light, sound, location, body feeling, and emotional tone. These features are not stored in one small chamber. They involve distributed systems. The hippocampus helps link them so that they can later be reassembled. Damage to this region can greatly impair the formation of new personal memories while leaving older skills or habits partly intact. This shows that memory is not one faculty, but a set of related processes. There are different kinds of memory. Declarative memory includes facts and events that can be consciously brought to mind. Procedural memory supports skills and habits, such as walking, typing, or playing an instrument. Emotional memory shapes responses to situations that have carried danger, comfort, loss, or reward. The body also learns patterns through repeated action. A person may remember how to balance on a bicycle without silently listing instructions. These forms of memory depend on different but overlapping brain systems. Together they give life continuity, familiarity, and skill. Memory is strengthened and reshaped during sleep. Sleep is not a simple absence of mental life. It is an active biological state with changing brain rhythms. body regulation, and altered awareness. During sleep, the brain can reactivate patterns related to recent experience. This reactivation may help stabilize some memories and weaken or reorganize others. Dreams show that memory fragments can combine in unusual ways when ordinary sensory input and waking control are reduced. The sleeping mind is not evidence of a traveler leaving the body. It is evidence that the brain continues to generate experience from internal activity. Emotion strongly influences what is remembered. Events linked with fear, grief, love, shame, surprise, or relief are often more likely to leave lasting traces. This does not make them perfectly accurate. Emotional memory can be vivid and still incomplete or distorted. Stress hormones and attention can strengthen certain details while narrowing others. The brain remembers in ways shaped by survival and meaning, not as a neutral archive. Personal identity therefore rests on memories that are powerful, selective, and changeable. The past inside the mind is not a fixed recording. It is a living pattern updated whenever it is recalled. Each act of remembering can change the memory. When a memory becomes active, it may become flexible for a time before settling again. New information, current mood, and repeated telling can alter its shape. This process is called reconsolidation, meaning the restabilizing of a memory after it has been reactivated. The result is both useful and unsettling. Memory allows learning and adaptation because it can change. Yet the same flexibility means that personal history is not preserved with perfect purity. The story of the self is physically maintained, but it is also revised by the present. The sense of a soul often depends on memory. A person seems to remain the same because childhood, family, language, wounds, hopes, and habits are carried forward. Without memory, the line of identity weakens. Certain brain diseases make this visible with quiet force. When memory systems fail, a person may lose names, places, recent events, and eventually parts of recognition and personality. The body remains present. The eyes may still open, the heart may still beat, and old gestures may remain. Yet the known person can become harder to reach. This does not prove that the person was only memory, but it shows that memory is central to personhood as it is lived and recognized. At this layer, physics enters through material change. Memory requires energy, molecular signaling, protein production, altered synapses, and network activity. It requires blood flow, sleep, and the survival of delicate tissue. A memory has no known existence as an independent object outside these processes. It is not weightless in the sense of being free from matter. It is weightless only in the sense that its meaning is not measured by mass alone. The memory of a voice may depend on microscopic changes, but the meaning of that voice belongs to the whole pattern of a life. The disturbing perspective grows more intimate here. If memory helps hold the person together, and memory depends on changing tissue, then the continuity of the self is physically vulnerable. Injury, disease, aging, drugs, trauma, and sleep loss can alter access to the past. The inner archive is not sealed beyond nature. It is embodied. It is maintained by cells that need oxygen and fuel. It is shaped by present conditions. It can fade, distort, return, and combine. Yet this does not make memory empty. It makes memory a form of living order. The brain carries the past not by preserving it unchanged, but by allowing it to guide present activity. A remembered hand, a learned word, a familiar road, and a private sorrow all arise from patterns that history has carved into tissue. The path inward reaches a region where the soul's feeling of continuity becomes a physical trace. delicate and active, held by networks that remember because they have been changed. Within memory's lasting traces, the sense of self forms as a more inward construction. The self feels like a single owner of experience, a stable center that remembers, chooses, feels, and continues through time. From inside ordinary awareness, this center seems immediate. It seems to stand behind thoughts, to look out through the eyes, to hold the body as its own. Yet science does not find a small inner figure directing the brain. It finds systems that build and update models of the body, the world, and the person's place within them. A model, in this sense, is an organized representation that helps guide action and prediction. The self begins with the body. The brain constantly receives signals from muscles, joints, skin, organs, blood chemistry, breathing, and balance systems. These signals help maintain a map of the body's position and condition. The body is not known only by sight or touch. It is also known from within. This inward sensing is called interoception, meaning the detection of internal bodily states: hunger, thirst, heartbeat, fullness, nausea, warmth, pain, and breath all contribute to the felt sense of being an embodied living system. Before there is a story about identity, there is a regulated body that must be kept alive. The brain also distinguishes between self-caused and outside-caused events. When a person moves an arm, the brain predicts the sensory results of that movement. This prediction helps explain why self-touch feels different from the same touch produced by another source. The brain reduces the surprise of expected sensations and remains more alert to unexpected ones. This process supports the feeling of agency, meaning the sense that an action belongs to the person who performs it. Agency is not a simple spark. It is built from intention, motor preparation, prediction, feedback, and comparison. The self also has a spatial side. The brain places the body within surroundings. Vision, touch, balance, hearing, and body position are brought together to form a practical sense of here. This allows reaching, walking, avoiding obstacles, and protecting the body. The boundary between body and world is usually stable, but experiments and neurological conditions show that it can be altered. A rubber hand can feel partly like one's own when visual and touch signals are matched in the right way. Certain brain disturbances can make a limb feel strange or not fully owned. These effects show that bodily selfhood is an active construction, not a simple given. A deeper layer of selfhood comes from memory. The brain links present experience with remembered experience, creating a sense of continuity. A person wakes in the morning and usually recognizes the body, room, name, relationships, duties, and past. This recognition is quiet and rapid. It gives the feeling that the same person continues from yesterday into today. The continuity is real as a lived process, but it depends on memory systems, language, social recognition, and stable bodily signals. When these systems are disrupted, the sense of self can fragment, weaken, or change. Language gives the self a narrative form. A narrative is a structured account that links events into meaning. Through language, a person can describe a childhood, a preference, a regret, a plan, or a moral belief. These descriptions become part of identity. They are shaped by family, culture, memory, and emotion. The brain does not merely store a list of facts about the person. It organizes them into a usable story. This story helps guide future choices and social behavior. It also changes over time as memories are reinterpreted and circumstances shift. Social life gives the self another boundary. A person becomes known through names, roles, gestures, promises, responsibilities, and relationships. The brain is sensitive to faces, voices, approval, rejection, trust, threat, and belonging. The sense of self is therefore not only built inside the skull, it develops in relation to others. A child learns who they are partly through being addressed, touched, protected, corrected, and remembered by other people. The self becomes a physical brain process shaped by a social world. The private center is not as private in origin as it feels. The self model also helps the organism survive. It gathers information around the needs of one body. It marks some events as relevant because they affect this body, these memories, these relationships, and these goals. Pain matters because it signals threat to the body. Shame matters because it signals social danger. Hope matters because it organizes future action. Fear matters because it prepares protection. The self is not an ornament added to consciousness. It is a way for the brain to coordinate the needs, history, and possible actions of the organism. This view changes the old idea of a soul as an unchanging inner essence. The self that science observes is flexible. It is influenced by sleep, illness, memory, injury, language, culture, and emotion. Certain brain injuries can change impulse control, social judgment, or personality. Some psychiatric and neurological conditions can alter the feeling of ownership, agency, continuity, or identity. Meditation, trauma, drugs, isolation. An intense stress can also change the way the self is experienced. These changes do not prove that selfhood is unreal. They show that it is a process maintained by physical and social conditions. The disturbing part is not that the self disappears under study. It is that the self becomes less like a hidden object and more like an ongoing achievement. The brain must keep linking body signals, memory, perception, emotion, and social meaning. It must update the model when the body moves, when the world changes, and when new events enter memory. It must preserve enough continuity for responsibility and recognition, while remaining flexible enough to learn. The self feels simple because the work is mostly hidden. At this inward region, the soul's traditional role as the bearer of identity begins to resemble a self-model built by the living brain. The model is not a lie. It is a useful, embodied structure that allows one organism to live as one person. It gives experience a center, action an owner, and memory a line through time. Yet it is not known to exist apart from the processes that create and maintain it. The path inward reaches the gathered identity of the person, where matter remembers itself, maps itself, names itself, and moves through the world as a single life. Within the self-model, conscious awareness forms the most difficult inner region. Awareness is the presence of experience itself, the fact that sights, sounds, body feelings, emotions, and thoughts appear in a living field. It is not simply the storage of information or the movement of signals. Many systems in the body process information without becoming part of awareness. Blood pressure is adjusted, digestion is regulated, reflexes occur, and many brain processes prepare actions before they are noticed. Conscious awareness is the portion of activity that becomes present as experience. Science studies awareness through careful links between reports, behavior, brain activity, injury, sleep, anesthesia, and disease. It cannot step directly into another mind. It must compare what a person can indicate with what the body and brain are doing. This creates a limit. Awareness is known from the inside with immediacy, but studied from the outside through evidence. A person can report seeing light, feeling pain, remembering a face, or losing awareness. Instruments can record brain activity, blood flow, electrical rhythms, and responses. The bridge between the two is strong in many places, but not complete. Wakefulness is one condition for ordinary awareness, though it is not the same thing. A person may be awake but unaware of some information. A person may be asleep and still dream. A patient may open the eyes without showing signs of conscious experience. Brainstem systems help maintain arousal, which is the general state of being awake and responsive. Widespread networks in the cortex and deeper structures help shape the contents of awareness. The contents include the seen room, the felt body, a remembered word, a pain, a mood, or a plan. Arousal is like the general level of readiness, while contents are what appears within experience. Attention and awareness are closely related, but they are not identical. Attention selects information for deeper processing. Awareness is the appearance of some information in experience. Often they move together. What is attended becomes clearer. Yet some attended processes may guide action without being fully conscious, and some background feelings may be conscious without sharp attention. This separation shows that awareness is not a single switch. It has degrees, layers, and changing boundaries. It can be narrowed by fear, expanded by calm attention, altered by drugs, and reduced by fatigue. The brain's large-scale communication seems important for conscious experience. Many theories suggest that awareness depends on information becoming widely available across networks rather than remaining trapped in a local process. When a stimulus is processed only briefly or weakly, it may influence behavior without being noticed. When activity becomes strong, recurrent, and connected across regions, it is more likely to enter awareness. Recurrent activity means signals return and interact again, rather than moving only one way. This allows perception, memory, meaning, and action planning to become joined in a more unified state. Other theories focus on integration, meaning the way information is combined into a whole that cannot be reduced to independent fragments. Ordinary awareness is not just color without shape, sound without location, or body feeling without mood. It arrives as a joined field. The body, room, time, and self are usually bound together. The brain's ability to integrate information may help explain why awareness feels unified, yet the full explanation remains unsettled. Observations indicate that consciousness depends on specific kinds of brain activity and communication. It remains uncertain exactly why these physical processes are accompanied by experience. This uncertainty is central and must be stated calmly. Modern science has strong evidence that changes in the brain change awareness. Anesthesia can remove ordinary consciousness by altering neural communication. Sleep changes awareness in stages. Brain injury can remove vision, language, memory, or self-recognition from experience. Seizures can produce altered states. Degenerative disease can slowly change the field of awareness. These facts show dependence. They do not yet provide a complete explanation of why matter organized as a brain has subjective experience at all. This gap is sometimes called the hard problem of consciousness, meaning the difficulty of explaining why physical processing is felt from within. Pain makes the problem vivid. Tissue damage can activate nerves. Signals can travel through the spinal cord and brain. Regions involved in sensation, emotion, attention, and body state can become active. Science can describe many pathways and treatments. Yet the felt hurt itself is known directly only by the one experiencing it. The physical description is necessary, but the inner quality is not fully captured by listing signals. This does not prove that pain comes from outside physics. It shows that present science describes the relations between brain and experience more completely than it explains the existence of experience itself. Visual awareness offers another window. Light enters the eye. Retinal cells respond. Signals travel through the thalamus, and visual cortex processes features. A person sees a shape, a color, a face, or motion. If certain brain areas are damaged, parts of visual awareness can disappear even when the eyes still work. Some patients can respond to visual information without consciously seeing it. This condition shows that information can guide behavior without entering awareness. The mind is not equal to all brain processing. Awareness is a particular mode of processing within the larger activity of the brain. The soul has often been used to name this inward light. It seems natural because awareness feels private, immediate, and unlike objects in the world, a stone can be weighed, a flame can be measured, a thought can be linked to brain activity, but its felt presence seems different from the measurement. Physics does not deny that experience exists. The experience is the starting fact for the person who has it. The scientific challenge is to understand how experience relates to matter without inventing effects that cannot be tested. The careful view remains open about what is not fully known while rejecting claims that go beyond evidence. At this layer, the disturbing perspective becomes most delicate. If awareness depends on brain activity, then the apparent inner witness is vulnerable to physical change. It can fade in deep sleep, vanish under anesthesia, fragment in illness, and return when networks recover. The witness does not appear as a separate object in the brain. It appears as the brain's activity organized into a field of experience. This does not make awareness an illusion. An illusion is still an experience. Awareness is the condition in which illusions, truths, memories, and sensations appear. The inward path reaches a quiet limit here. The body can be described as matter. Energy flow can be measured. Nerve signals can be traced. Brain architecture can be mapped. Memory and selfhood can be linked to changing networks. Conscious awareness can be studied through its conditions and correlations. Yet the inner presence of experience remains partly unresolved. Science knows much about when awareness appears, changes, and disappears. It does not yet fully explain why the universe, arranged in this living way, is accompanied by a point of view. The old word soul rests near this uncertainty, no longer free from matter, but not replaced by a complete final answer. Within conscious awareness, emotion and meaning form a still more inward region. Awareness does not appear as a cold display of facts. It arrives with tone, weight, attraction, avoidance, comfort, unease, desire, grief, and care. A sound can be harmless in one moment and alarming in another. A room can feel safe, lonely, familiar, or strange. A memory can carry warmth or pain. These qualities make experience matter to the living person. They help explain why the idea of the soul has often been tied not only to thought, but to love, fear, guilt, longing, and moral life. Emotion is not separate from the body. It is a coordinated state involving brain activity, internal organs, hormones, muscles, attention, and memory. When danger is detected, the body may prepare for action. Heart rate can rise, breathing can change, blood flow can shift, muscles can tense, attention can narrow toward the source of threat. The brain marks the situation as important and prepares possible responses. The feeling of fear is not one chemical or one brain region. It is a whole body pattern interpreted within awareness. The same is true in different forms for anger, sadness, joy, disgust, tenderness, and relief. The brain regions involved in emotion do not operate as isolated centers. The amygdala helps detect and learn the significance of certain events, especially those related to threat and safety. The hypothalamus helps coordinate bodily responses through hormones and autonomic pathways. The insula helps represent internal body states and contributes to feelings such as disgust, pain, and bodily awareness. Prefrontal regions help regulate emotion, connect it with goals, and adjust responses according to context. Memory systems link present feeling with past experience. Together, these systems give emotion its force and direction. Meaning grows from this emotional weighting. A fact becomes meaningful when it matters to an organism with needs, history, and possible futures. Food matters to hunger. Shelter matters to cold. A familiar face matters because of memory and attachment. A warning matters because it changes action. Meaning is not added to life from nowhere. It emerges as the brain relates the world to the body's condition, past learning, and expected outcomes. A bare signal becomes important when it's tied to survival, relationship, pain, pleasure, duty, or loss. Reward and motivation help shape meaning. The brain contains systems that respond to value, learning, and expected outcomes. Dopamine is one important chemical messenger in these systems, though it does not simply mean pleasure. It helps signal prediction, motivation, and learning about rewards and actions. When an outcome is better or worse than expected, the brain can adjust future behavior. This allows organisms to seek food, safety, social contact, and other needed conditions. Desire, habit, and effort are supported by these physical systems. The will that feels inward is influenced by reward circuits, memory, bodily need, and learned value. Attachment gives meaning a social depth. Human infants survive through care, and the developing brain is shaped by touch, voice, feeding, protection, and emotional response. Later relationships continue to affect stress systems, mood, identity, and memory. Love is not reduced to one hormone or one pathway. It is a complex pattern of bonding, attention, reward, memory, body regulation, and social understanding. Its physical basis does not make it false. A song is not made false by air vibrations, and a promise is not made false by speech muscles. In the same way, love remains real as lived meaning even though it depends on the body and brain. Moral feeling also belongs to this region. Guilt, empathy, shame, fairness, compassion, and responsibility involve emotion, memory, social learning, and reasoning. The brain represents other people's faces, pain, intentions, and needs. It compares actions with learned rules and expected consequences. It carries the bodily discomfort of wrongdoing and the warmth of repair or belonging. Moral life cannot be located in a single organ part as a simple object. It is an organized capacity of a social brain living among other vulnerable bodies. The old language of soul often gathers moral life into one sacred center, while science shows many interacting systems beneath it. Emotion can alter perception itself. A fearful person may notice threat more quickly. A sad person may recall losses more easily. A calm person may see more options. Stress can narrow thought and strengthen some memories while weakening others. Chronic stress can influence sleep, immune function, attention, and mood. This shows that meaning is not a thin interpretation placed after perception. It is part of how the world is selected, organized, and remembered. The emotional brain does not merely react to reality, it helps construct the reality that becomes available to awareness. The body's internal state gives emotion its texture. Hunger may make the world seem urgent. Fatigue may make effort feel heavier. Illness may drain colour from experience. Slow breathing and safety may soften fear. Hormones released during stress can prepare action, but they can also disturb sleep and memory if prolonged. The gut, heart, lungs, muscles, and immune signals all contribute to the background feeling of being alive. Meaning is therefore embodied. It is not a pure light floating above flesh. It is felt through the body's changing condition. This perspective can feel disturbing because the most cherished parts of life become physically dependent. Love can be affected by brain injury. Mood can shift with chemicals, sleep, hormones, illness, and trauma. A sense of purpose can weaken during depression and return with recovery. Compassion can be strengthened by experience and reduced by fear or exhaustion. The soul has often been imagined as the stable keeper of value. Science instead finds value carried by systems that are living, changing, and vulnerable. This does not make value unreal. It makes value fragile in the same way life is fragile. The meaning of a person is also larger than the private brain. It is held in relationships, actions, records, habits, language, and memory in others. A person's kindness can alter another person's nervous system, choices, and future. A teaching can survive in behavior. A loss can reshape a family. These effects are physical and social, not supernatural in scientific terms. They show how a life extends through influence, while the living body remains the source of its direct awareness. The soul, in this translated view, becomes less like a sealed object and more like a pattern of felt value moving through body, brain, and relationship. At this inward region, awareness is no longer just present. It matters. It leans toward comfort, recoils from harm, reaches toward others, protects memories, and forms values. Emotion gives weight to perception. Meaning gives direction to action. The old idea of the soul finds some of its strongest roots here, in the felt seriousness of life. Physics and biology do not remove that seriousness. They place it within matter that senses, remembers, regulates, and cares. The path inward reaches the weighted life of the person, where the body does not merely exist, but finds the world important. Within emotion and meaning, death becomes the region where organized life begins to fail. It is not an event that physics treats as a doorway in itself. It is a biological process in which the systems maintaining the body's order can no longer continue. The heart may stop moving blood. Breathing may stop bringing oxygen. Brain activity may lose the conditions needed for awareness. Cells that once balanced ions, repaired damage, used fuel, and communicated with neighbours begin to lose control of their inner state. The living pattern that held a person together becomes unstable. Life depends on continuous circulation. Blood carries oxygen, glucose, hormones, immune cells, heat, and waste products. When circulation stops, oxygen delivery falls quickly. The brain is especially sensitive because its energy demand is high and its reserves are small. Neurons require energy to maintain electrical gradients across their membranes. Without oxygen and fuel, adenosine triphosphate production declines. Membrane pumps fail. Ions move in uncontrolled ways. Cells swell. Chemical signals are released in damaging amounts. Networks that once supported awareness and selfhood lose their organized activity. Breathing is equally central. Air enters the lungs, oxygen crosses into blood, and carbon dioxide leaves the body. When breathing stops, oxygen falls and carbon dioxide rises. Blood chemistry changes, acidity increases. The heart and brain become disturbed by the altered internal environment. The old association between breath and soul comes from this visible boundary. A breathing body appears animated. A body without breath becomes still. Science describes the boundary through gas exchange, blood flow, and cellular energy. The symbol remains powerful, but the process is material. The stopping of the heart does not immediately mean that every cell has died. Different tissues fail at different rates. Some cells may survive briefly without normal circulation. Others are damaged rapidly. Death is therefore not a single switch at the level of every molecule. It is the collapse of coordination. The organism can no longer maintain itself as one living whole. Its parts begin to follow local chemistry without the larger regulation that once joined them. The body remains made of the same elements, but the system that used those elements to sustain a person is ending. Brain death has a specific medical meaning. It refers to the irreversible loss of all functions of the entire brain, including the brainstem, under defined conditions. In such a state, the brain no longer supports consciousness, breathing drive, or the integrated neural functions needed for the organism as a person. Machines may move air into the lungs and help preserve circulation for a time, but the brain's living activity has been lost irreversibly. This distinction shows that death is not judged only by warmth or heartbeat. It is judged by the loss of the integrated processes that make recovery impossible. At the cellular level, the loss of order spreads quietly. Cells deprived of energy cannot maintain their membranes. Calcium can accumulate inside cells and activate destructive enzymes. Proteins lose normal function. Mitochondria fail. Waste products build. Some cells die through controlled processes when conditions allow. Others die through rupture and injury. The immune system, once part of the body's defense, no longer coordinates repair in the same way. The boundary between living tissue and decaying matter becomes a gradient of failing processes. Decay follows because the body is still chemistry. Bacteria already present in the gut and on surfaces begin to act without the living body's usual control. Enzymes within cells break down structures, molecules diffuse, gases form, tissues change color, texture, and smell. Insects, microbes, oxygen, moisture, temperature, and surroundings influence the pace. The body returns matter to the environment, not as a poetic exception to physics, but through ordinary biological and chemical pathways. Carbon, nitrogen, water, minerals, and heat move outward again. This return does not preserve the person as a conscious center in any known physical sense. The atoms remain, but the arrangement that supported awareness is gone. Energy is conserved, but usable organization is lost. Heat spreads, chemical bonds change. Information in the ordinary physical sense may leave traces in the world, but the active pattern of the living brain no longer maintains memory or experience. A body after death is not nothing. It is still matter, still part of earth, still able to nourish other processes, yet it is no longer the self-regulating organism that sensed and cared. The emotional force of death comes from this difference between matter and organization. Those who remain can see the face, the hands, the familiar shape. The same atoms are not all gone. The body may still resemble the person, but the responsiveness has ended. No attention returns, no memory answers, no warmth of recognition moves through the eyes. The disturbance lies in the fact that personhood depends on ongoing process, not on material presence alone. The body without the living process reveals how deeply identity rested on activity. Physics describes this through order and entropy. Entropy is a measure related to the number of possible arrangements of a system and the spreading of energy. Living bodies maintain local order by taking in energy and releasing waste heat. They do not violate physics. They build and preserve structure by increasing disorder elsewhere. When metabolism stops, the body can no longer maintain its organized state. Gradients fade, barriers break, molecules move toward more probable arrangements. The living pattern gives way to dispersal. This does not mean that death is instant erasure in every human sense. Effects remain. Other people remember. Records, marks, children, teachings, objects, and altered lives can carry influence forward. The dead person's matter continues in the world. The causes set in motion by their actions continue in other bodies and places. These are real continuities. They are not, by themselves, evidence that private awareness continues. Science can trace influence, matter, and energy. It cannot confirm survival of a personal point of view without detectable processes that preserve and sustain it. At this region, the soul as an enduring inner essence faces its hardest scientific boundary. The features most associated with it, memory, awareness, agency, feeling, and identity, depend during life on organized bodily and brain activity. When the organization irreversibly fails, known evidence indicates that these features cease as active processes. What remains is matter, influence, memory in others, and uncertainty about questions beyond measurement. Science does not claim more than its methods can support. It observes that the living person requires conditions that death removes. The inward path reaches the fading order of the body. The calm facts are not cruel, but they are severe. A life is not held by matter alone, and not by energy alone. It is held by matter and energy arranged in a living pattern that must be constantly renewed. Death is the ending of that renewal. The old word soul stands beside this ending with grief and hope, while physics describes the quiet collapse of breath, blood, energy, signals, and form. Within death and decay, the question of information forms a still finer region. If a person is not preserved by matter alone, and not by energy alone, then the remaining scientific question turns toward pattern. During life, identity depends on organized information in the brain and body. Information here means structured differences that can make a difference to a system, a memory, a learned skill, a name, a face, a fear, and a preference all depend on physical arrangements that guide future activity. They are not separate from matter, but they are also not described fully by listing atoms. They depend on how matter is arranged. A written word gives a simple example. Ink on paper is ordinary material. The meaning does not come from the ink as a substance, but from the pattern of marks. If the marks are smudged beyond recognition, the ink remains, but the message is lost. The same idea applies more delicately to the brain. A memory is not one molecule and not one fixed spot. It is a pattern of change connections and possible activity across living tissue. If the tissue is damaged beyond repair, the matter remains for a time, but the usable pattern can be lost. During life, the brain preserves information actively. It maintains cell membranes, chemical gradients, synaptic structures, protein turnover, blood flow, and network timing. These processes are not passive storage. They are ongoing maintenance. The brain keeps memories available because cells remain alive and connected in particular ways. It keeps personality stable because patterns of response are repeatedly supported by the same living system. It keeps awareness possible because communication among regions continues. When death removes the conditions for maintenance, information begins to degrade with the tissue that carries it. This loss is not always immediate in every microscopic detail. Some structures remain briefly, some molecular traces persist longer. Bones can preserve shape for centuries under certain conditions. Deoxyribonucleic acid can sometimes survive for long periods in fragments when protected by cold or dryness. Written records can survive because they are stored outside the body in stable materials. But the information that makes a person a conscious self is not only genetic sequence or body shape. It includes dynamic patterns of brain connectivity, memory, interpretation, emotion, and ongoing activity. These patterns are fragile because they depend on living organization. The genome is sometimes mistaken for the whole code of a person. It is not. The genome contains inherited biological instructions that influence development, body form, and many traits. It does not contain the full history of a person's memories, choices, language, relationships, and experiences. Identical twins can share nearly the same genetic sequence and still become different persons because their bodies, brains, and lives develop through different events. The soul, if connected with personal identity, cannot be reduced to the genome. Genes help build the body, but they do not store the lived life in full. The brain's information is also not like a simple digital file. A digital file can be copied if its bits are read and reproduced accurately. The living brain has no known complete map from which a person can be restored. Its information is distributed across cells, synapses, molecular states, body interactions, and ongoing activity. Even a detailed scan of brain structure would not automatically capture all relevant dynamic states, biochemical conditions, and developmental history. Current science cannot read a brain at death and recover a continuing conscious person. The challenge is not only technical, but conceptual, because personal identity may depend on process as much as structure. Some forms of information leave the body and persist in the world. A person's words can be recorded, their actions can alter other lives, their habits can be imitated, their children may inherit genes and cultural patterns, their work can remain in tools, art, buildings, laws, memories, and stories. These continuities are real. They can shape the future long after the body is gone. Yet they are not the same as the survival of private awareness. A recorded voice can sound like the person, but it does not hear itself. A photograph can preserve an image, but it does not look back with awareness. A memory in another mind is meaningful, but it is another living brain carrying a trace. Physics treats information with care, especially in thermodynamics, computation, and quantum theory. Information is always linked to physical states. It is not a ghostly substance floating free of matter. To store information, some physical system must have distinguishable states that remain stable enough to be read or used. In the brain, these states are biological and active. After death, the supporting system changes, heat spreads, chemistry shifts, membranes break, and structures decay. As the physical states become disordered, the information they carried becomes harder or impossible to recover. This is the central disturbance of the information view. Energy continues, matter continues, influence may continue, but the personal pattern can be lost when the organized living system fails. Conservation of energy does not conserve the arrangement that made a person. Conservation of atoms does not conserve memory. A shattered glass still contains the same material, but the shape no longer holds water. A burned book still contains atoms from paper and ink in altered form, but the story has been destroyed unless copied elsewhere. A dead brain may still contain matter from a life, but the living pattern that supported awareness is no longer active. Uncertainty remains at the edges of knowledge, but it must not be used as evidence for unsupported claims. Science does not know every detail of consciousness. It does not yet have a complete theory of personal identity. It cannot inspect subjective experience directly from outside. Yet the evidence available shows that memory, personality, and awareness are closely dependent on brain activity and bodily regulation. When those processes are irreversibly lost, there is no established physical mechanism by which the same private self continues. Unknowns remain unknown. They do not become proof of survival. At this inward region, the old idea of an immortal soul meets the fragility of information. The self appears not as a substance that can simply depart, but as a pattern sustained by living matter. That pattern has depth and meaning while it exists. It can influence other patterns. It can be remembered, copied in fragments, and carried in effects. But the person as a conscious center requires more than scattered traces. It requires an organized process capable of awareness. Known physical systems show no preserved personal awareness after the brain's living organization is gone. The path inward therefore reaches a quiet distinction. Something of a person can remain, but not everything remains in the same way. Matter remains as matter. Energy changes form. Genetic information may continue through descendants. Cultural information may continue through others. Emotional influence may continue through memory. The living self, however, depends on a particular organized pattern that is deeply vulnerable to death. If the soul is translated into information, it becomes precious not because it is indestructible, but because it is difficult to preserve and easy to lose. The disturbing view is not that life has no meaning. It is that meaning depends on order, and order must be maintained. Within the fragile question of information, quantum physics forms a careful boundary. It is often brought into discussions of the soul because it seems strange, deep, and far removed from ordinary experience. Quantum physics studies matter and energy at very small scales, where particles and fields behave in ways that do not match everyday intuition. Electrons, photons, atoms, and other systems can show wave-like and particle-like properties. Their possible states can be described by probabilities before measurement. Under certain conditions, separate systems can become linked in ways called entanglement. These findings are real parts of modern physics, supported by experiment and used in technologies. They do not by themselves provide evidence for a soul. The appeal of quantum language is understandable. Consciousness feels mysterious, and quantum physics is also difficult to picture. Both seem to resist simple mechanical explanation. This resemblance can make them appear connected. Yet a resemblance in mystery is not a scientific link. For a claim to become part of science, it must define what is happening, show how it follows from known theory or new evidence, and make testable predictions. Most claims that place the soul in quantum processes do not meet this standard. They use words from physics while leaving the proposed mechanism unclear. Quantum effects certainly occur in the body, because the body is made of atoms and molecules. Chemical bonds, light absorption, electron behavior, and molecular structure all depend on quantum rules at their foundation. Photosynthesis, vision, and enzyme reactions involve processes that cannot be fully understood without quantum physics. This does not mean that thoughts, memories, or personal identity are quantum souls. It means that ordinary chemistry rests on deeper physical laws. The same is true for rocks, water, air, and metal. The presence of quantum physics beneath matter does not make every complex pattern a carrier of immortal awareness. The brain is warm, wet, noisy, and chemically active. These conditions matter. Many delicate quantum states are easily disrupted by interaction with their surroundings. This disruption is called decoherence, meaning the loss of a coherent quantum relationship into ordinary mixed behavior through contact with the environment. In laboratory settings, delicate quantum effects often require careful isolation, low temperatures, or precise control. The brain does not provide such conditions on a large scale. This does not rule out every small quantum contribution to biology, but it makes broad claims about stable quantum consciousness difficult to support without strong evidence. Some proposals suggest that consciousness arises from quantum processes inside tiny structures within cells. These ideas remain debated and are not part of established consensus. They attempt to connect awareness with physical processes smaller than neurons, but they face major challenges. They must show that the proposed quantum states exist in the living brain, remain stable long enough to matter, influence neural activity in the required way, and explain subjective experience better than other approaches. Present evidence does not establish that such processes explain the soul or personal survival after death. Entanglement is another term often misused. In physics, entanglement means that the states of systems are described together in a way that produces correlations stronger than classical expectations. It does not mean that minds can freely communicate across distance, or that a person's awareness can leave the brain. Entanglement is fragile and specific. It is measured under controlled conditions. It does not provide an open channel for memory, intention, or identity. Using the word to suggest a universal spiritual connection goes beyond what experiments show. The uncertainty principle is also often misunderstood. It states that certain pairs of physical properties, such as position and momentum, cannot both be known with unlimited precision for a quantum system. This is not a statement that anything can happen because knowledge is incomplete. It does not create room for a soul to direct matter without evidence. It describes a precise mathematical feature of quantum systems, human choice, moral life. An inner awareness cannot be explained simply by pointing to uncertainty at small scales. Randomness is not the same as agency. A random event does not become a self. The observer in quantum physics is another source of confusion. In popular language, the word observer can sound like a conscious mind watching nature. In physics, measurement involves interaction with a system in a way that produces a definite recorded outcome. A detector, instrument, or environment can play this role without human awareness. Consciousness is not required in the standard practical use of quantum theory for experiments and technology. The idea that the mind collapses reality remains a philosophical interpretation, not a settled scientific fact. It does not provide evidence that consciousness exists apart from the brain. Quantum physics therefore sets a boundary between legitimate mystery and unsupported explanation. It shows that nature is stranger than everyday intuition. It does not show that every ancient belief can be placed inside that strangeness. A careful scientific view does not reject quantum theory. It respects it by not using it beyond its evidence. The soul, if claimed as a quantum entity, must still be defined, measured, and connected to testable effects. Without that, the claim remains a metaphor or speculation, not established knowledge. This boundary is important because uncertainty can be comforting when death, identity, and awareness are involved. A gap in explanation may seem like a doorway, yet science treats gaps cautiously. Not knowing everything about consciousness does not mean that any proposed answer becomes equally likely. The known evidence links personal memory, awareness, and selfhood to the living brain. Quantum physics has not overturned this dependence. It deepens the description of matter. But it does not show that the personal pattern survives the loss of the biological system that carries it. At this inward region, the disturbing perspective becomes one of restraint. The universe is not made less profound by refusing unsupported claims. Matter is already strange. A brain built from ordinary atoms can produce perception, memory, emotion, and selfhood under conditions still not fully explained. That is enough mystery without adding claims that evidence does not support. The soul remains a powerful human idea, but quantum physics does not presently rescue it as a separate, measurable substance. It marks the edge where careful knowledge ends and speculation begins. The path inward reaches this careful boundary and stays there. Established quantum physics belongs to atoms, molecules, light, fields, probability, and measurement. Conscious life belongs, in known evidence, to organized living systems with active brains and bodies. The two domains are connected because brains are made of matter, but connection is not proof of survival or separateness. A calm view leaves room for what remains unknown while holding firmly to what is observed. The soul, seen through this boundary, is not confirmed by quantum strangeness. It remains an ancient name facing a modern demand for evidence. Within the careful boundary of quantum claims, the path reaches the deepest scientific view of personhood. It does not arrive at a hidden chamber where the soul can be lifted out as a separate object. It arrives at a living center made from body, brain, memory, awareness, emotion, and uncertainty. The person appears as an organized process within matter, not as matter alone, and not as a substance apart from matter. This view is quiet, but it changes the shape of the ancient question. The soul becomes less like a thing contained inside the body and more like the name once given to the whole inward life of a living being. The body provides the ground. It gathers elements from earth, uses energy from food, breathes air, circulates blood, and maintains the chemical conditions that cells require. It is not a passive container. It is the ongoing work that keeps the person possible. The heart moves blood. The lungs exchange gases, the kidneys balance fluids, the liver processes chemicals, and the immune system watches for injury and threat. These processes do not feel like identity in ordinary awareness, yet they support every moment in which identity appears. When they fail, thought and awareness become unstable. The inner life rests on a living body that rarely announces the depth of its service. The brain gives this body a point of view. It maps the world, monitors the body, remembers the past, predicts the near future, and guides action. Its folded tissue does not contain a tiny observer. It contains networks that create perception, attention, emotion, memory, and selfhood through coordinated activity. The world that seems directly present is built through signals from light, sound, touch, smell, taste, and internal bodily states. The unity of experience arises because many processes are joined into one working field. The person seems simple from within because the brain hides most of its construction. Memory gives the person continuity. It links present awareness with earlier states, familiar places, names, wounds, skills, and relationships. It is not a perfect record. It is a living reconstruction supported by change connections and repeated activity. It can be altered, strengthened, weakened, and lost. Yet it gives life its line through time. Without memory, the self becomes thinner, more fragile, less able to hold its own story. The soul has often been imagined as the keeper of identity, but the evidence shows identity carried by physical traces that must remain organized to work. Emotion gives the person weight. Awareness is not a neutral screen. It is colored by need, care, danger, loss, belonging, and hope. The body and brain assign value to the world, and that value directs action. Meaning grows where perception meets survival, memory, relationship, and future possibility. A face matters because of attachment. A place matters because of history. A promise matters because social life and moral feeling make it important. Science does not remove these meanings by finding their physical roots. It shows that meaning is embodied, delicate, and dependent on living systems. The self gathers these layers into a practical center. It says that this body is here. This action belongs to this organism. This memory belongs to this history, and this future matters to this life. It is not found as a hard object inside the skull. It is a model continuously updated by brain and body. The model can be stable enough for responsibility, love, work, and recognition. It can also be changed by illness, injury, sleep, age, culture, and grief. The self is real as a process, but not fixed as an independent substance. It is made again and again. Conscious awareness remains the most difficult part. Science can describe many of its conditions. It can show how awareness changes with sleep, anesthesia, injury, drugs, attention, and disease. It can link experiences to brain activity and bodily states. Yet it does not fully explain why organized matter is accompanied by a first-person field at all. This uncertainty is honest and important. It does not prove a separate soul. It also does not make awareness unreal. It marks a frontier where evidence is strong about dependence and incomplete about ultimate explanation. The disturbing new perspective is therefore not a simple denial. It is a relocation. What earlier ages called the soul may point toward real features of human life awareness, identity, memory, moral feeling, and the inward sense of being someone. Physics and biology do not find these features floating apart from nature. They find them in the temporary order of a living body and brain. This sacred distance becomes biological closeness. The hidden center becomes a pattern. The immortal substance becomes an open question unsupported by present evidence. The person becomes both more natural and more fragile. This fragility gives the view its seriousness. A life depends on breath, blood, chemistry, sleep, food, temperature, and the health of soft tissue. A change in a small region of brain can alter speech. A chemical imbalance can darken mood. A loss of oxygen can erase awareness. A disease can take memory piece by piece. The qualities most often associated with the soul are not protected from physical change. They are carried by it. This can feel severe, but it is also precise. It shows why care matters. It shows why bodies matter. It shows why injury, rest, nourishment, safety, and love have real physical consequences. The view also gives matter unexpected depth. Matter is not merely dull substance. Under the right conditions, matter becomes living tissue. Living tissue senses. Sensing tissue remembers. Remembering tissue forms a self. A self becomes aware of meaning and loss. The universe, in this local form, knows light, warmth, fear, kindness, and time from within. This does not require exaggeration. It is already profound in plain terms. The person is not reduced to dust. The person is shown as dust organized into breath, blood, memory, and awareness for a while. At the quiet center, science leaves the soul transformed. It cannot confirm an immortal inner object. It can describe a living pattern of matter and energy that gives rise to a person. It can state that much remains uncertain about consciousness itself. It can also state that known evidence ties personal awareness to the brain and body. The ancient word remains as a human symbol for inward life. But physics asks for mechanisms, measurements, and continuity of pattern. In that light, the soul becomes the name for something real in experience and fragile in nature, a temporary center of organized life looking out from matter into the world. After the inward path reaches its quiet center, the question grows softer. The body remains part of earth. The breath belongs to air. The warmth belongs to chemistry. The memories belong to living networks that change with time. The self appears as a pattern held by matter, energy, care, and experience. It is not simple, and it is not separate from nature in any known scientific way. The old word soul continues to carry human weight. It holds grief, love, responsibility, memory, and the private sense of being alive. Physics does not measure that word as a separate substance. Biology does not find it waiting behind the heart or hidden inside a single point of the brain. Neuroscience finds tissue, signals, patterns, and fragile forms of awareness. Yet the absence of a separate object does not make the inward life empty. It shows that inward life depends on order, and that order is rare. A person is matter arranged so carefully that the world appears from within. Light becomes sight, air becomes breath, food becomes motion, touch becomes comfort, memory becomes identity, emotion becomes meaning. The same universe that makes stone an ocean also makes a living body able to fear loss, recognize kindness, and wonder about its own source. What remains uncertain stays uncertain. Consciousness is closely tied to the brain, but its deepest explanation is not complete. Personal survival beyond death has no established physical mechanism, but grief and love still leave real traces in others' lives. The scientific view is calm and severe, yet it does not remove dignity. It places dignity inside the fragile fact of living order. The soul, seen this way, becomes a name for the whole inward pattern of a person while that pattern is held together. It is not less precious because it is temporary. It is precious because it depends on so much and appears for a while.